All right. So, hey, welcome everybody to Flip the Switch podcast. Today, I'm super excited to be joined by James Brennan. So, quick background on James. James is probably the first entrepreneur that I knew of as a young buck, probably age 21 or so, coming back to San Diego. And James was kind of a legend already. At that time, he was running Enlightened Hospitality Group, which for any of the San Diego people was the owner of Sidebar and Stingery, and later I believe was sold to Hakkasan Group. And James is also a restaurateur with Herringbone and many others with Brian Malarkey. Also co-founder of Sushi Juice, which has been a pretty legendary brand. They had a real nice partial exit to Coca-Cola and Goldman Sachs. So a lot of people know that story, as well as co-founder of Kopari Beauty, I think investor and owner of Original Grain Watches, and most recently working on a brand called Lively, which we'll talk about a bit, and Sway Brands. And he's basically the ultimate entrepreneur, hustler, originally from New York, but primarily resides in La Jolla, right where I grew up. And also beyond that, one of the things that I've always really respected about James is not only how successful he's been and his ability to penetrate so many different industries and markets with success, but also he's your consummate and great family man, father to three beautiful children, and just a great guy that will take your call, share his wisdom, and just somebody that I really respect. So James, it's awesome to have you on the podcast here, and really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for that intro. Legend makes me blush, but I'll take it, I guess. And the only correction I have is 4 kids, not 3. So well done.
Nice. Yeah, and I think I guess jumping into things, James, we're going to talk a little bit today about industries and how you've been able to really be industry agnostic in certain ways and succeed across a lot of different categories. And then we'll dive a little bit into leadership and biz partners, and then kind of your current motivation. But we were talking the other day, and you said a quote to me that I thought was really interesting, and it was, "It's total chaos and the opportunities are endless." And so I figure, being in this kind of COVID universe, we had to start and hear a little bit about your thoughts with that and kind of what you meant by that quote.
Yeah, well, it is total chaos, and it seems every day we wake up to a new news cycle, and if it's not one thing, it's another. And when we started this whole thing back in early March, things started to present themselves as a time that the world was going to look back on and say, look at 2020 and look at how the world changed after it. So, I've been called and asked for advice and just thoughts around all this stuff that's going on, and by both young and old. And I look at this as kind of the great equalizer, right? Like, you could have a great brand in a certain category that was kicking ass in February, and then all of a sudden in March the rug got pulled out from under you, and you may have taken a 1, 2, or 3 year kind of reverse on where you currently were. And some of the bigger companies that are out there that were just kind of making their way, we all kind of tend to let ourselves get a little bloated over time, and some corrected quickly, some didn't. Those that didn't are suffering right now and trying to find their way. But whether it's the restaurant industry, consumer products, any type of services that are out there, like, everybody's getting a reset right now. And I think if you're a hustler and you've got an entrepreneurial spirit, it's time to really start looking around, and sometimes these are the times that it's kind of like buying in the stock market. You want to buy when everybody's panicking and wants to sell. Well, it's kind of the same way being an entrepreneur. You want to be able to kind of, like, I tell people that I've started 2 new businesses since being locked down, and they're like, "What are you talking about? Like, why aren't you trying to figure out how to just keep your existing businesses afloat?" And, for me, it was more about, like, look, there's a major opportunity and there's a major reset going on, and what are the things that I'd like to do, and where can I jump in and take some risk and get rolling on something.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, the stock market analogy about buying low. You know, what I've seen so far, one is that a lot of the consumer brands are actually doing really well. They might have supply chain issues and things like that, but there's definitely some industries that are winning through this, and you're probably in some of those. And then, you know, secondarily, I think I've seen two things that can be a silver lining potentially. One is that I've definitely seen entrepreneurs that have business models that they were stuck in, and were never going to, you know, be the types of businesses that they wanted. And so sometimes it takes a nudge to force you to, you know, take the steps backwards to take the steps forward. So certainly, you know, I've seen that in a variety of different categories. And then two, and I'd love to get your take on it, but there's definitely some great acquisitions to be had. I'm not sure that they've really hit yet, because a lot of these companies and entrepreneurs are still being supported by the government, and that's buying them some time. But certainly, you know, entrepreneurs that have personally guaranteed debt and are fatigued and, you know, taking blows. And I think even what we saw happen in California today and yesterday with the second wave of lockdowns, it's just fatiguing. And so I've got to think that there's going to be some great acquisitions to be had. Is that something that you're looking into? And I guess what types of, how do you go around finding those opportunities, and what's your process for that?
Yeah, it's funny that you said that, because just in, you know, the past, you know, week, I've really started to see some of the trouble present itself. You know, I've gotten a handful of decks on mostly consumer product brands that are scrambling and kind of flopping around on the deck like a fish out of water and not really knowing what to do next. So you're right, there is going to be a lag, but I do think it's starting. It's definitely starting. I mean, just in the past 2 days, I've seen 3 decks of really nice, beautiful brands that are just in some semblance of financial trouble, or, like you said, fatigue. So yeah, I mean, it's common.
Yeah, totally. And I think one of the neat opportunities for investors or entrepreneurs is that the balance sheet is king right now. And so if you've got that strong balance sheet, you know, it gives you leverage, and obviously there's really efficient access to capital if you have the balance sheet. And, you know, I think that there are a lot of entrepreneurs that are more focused on not how do I make money and succeed, but how do I really limit my downside and not get caught holding the bag. So we'll dive a little bit more into that in a bit. But I wanted to kind of start off, you know, one of the things that I've always really admired about your career is that you've had success and you've played across, you know, finance, hospitality, consumer brands, even SaaS businesses on the B2B side. How has that happened, I guess, or kind of talk me through that a bit, and how that's played out? And, you know, is that kind of the entrepreneur in you and the shiny toy, or was it opportunistic or strategic? And I guess how has that kind of happened and unfolded in your career?
Yeah, so I mean, look, school was a great experience, but I didn't go to University of San Diego to specifically study I was never going to be an accountant, right? Like I wasn't going to be a lawyer. You know, I got my BA from there, and I had a great time, and I met a lot of really great people, and learned a lot about life and myself. I took a short gig with a big timeshare corp right out of school. And I lasted about 6 months. The one thing I learned very quickly was that, you know, I probably wasn't going to do well in that environment. I wasn't going to be the type of person that was going to try to climb a corporate ladder and wake up one day and be a CEO and live happily ever after. And so I had the opportunity to get into the mortgage industry right around that time that I quit that job. And I was able to, with some money that I saved from a business that I sold when I graduated from USD that I built up for a couple of years there, I was able to buy into the mortgage company as a partner. I knew nothing about loans. or how to do them. But I figured I could learn it quickly, and I did. And that was my first real lesson in marketing, and kind of how to sell yourself, because at the end of the day, everybody had access to the same programs that were out there, whether you were going to B of A, Washington Mutual, or whoever. It was really about getting that person that you were talking to let you facilitate it, right? So you really had to market and then sell yourself. And I had some pretty wild success, more than I ever could have really imagined at such a young age. And I made the Mortgage Originator magazine as a rookie. They announced 15 of the top rookies in the country, and I made that in 1997. And then from 1998 through 2003, I made the top 200 by dollar volume every year. And I think at my peak, I did about $165 million in loans, but I had only done about 175 loans. So my average loan size was almost $1 million. And that was because that's who I chose to go after and market towards. And one little caveat to that, I think my feather in my cap, or the fondest memory I have on trying to figure out how to really set myself aside, throughout those 5 years where I was cranking away, the competitive nature of the mortgage market was just insane. Everybody, again, had the same access to the same programs. And I came home one day, and in my, I was doing all these mailers. Everybody was getting their lists from title companies, and you'd send out 10,000 mailers here, 10,000 mailers there. And, you'd get such a low call-in rate. And the reason why was because everybody was sending those things out, right? And I remember specifically the day that I came home in a house that I just bought, my first house, and I'm standing there and I'm looking at, in my mailbox, there had to be 15 mortgage companies pitching me because I just bought this home. And then in that same batch of mail, there was a square envelope that was a wedding invitation to one of my friends from college. And a light bulb went off, and the next Monday morning I went into work and I rejigged and tooled my whole mailer, and I turned it into a square look-alike wedding invitation, and my calls in went up by 400%. I mean, it was insane. People were calling me just to tell me that I was clever, right? It was that good. And so I mean, just being able to do that and learn a lot about myself, that led me to have some money to invest into hospitality, which is kind of where I grew up, right? My first real job was at a place that's 4 blocks away from my house here in New York, called the Harbor Light. I was a busboy at the age of 11. I got demoted to the dishwashing pit at some point, maybe when I wasn't a cute 11-year-old kid anymore and was more of a 13, 14-year-old adolescent. They stuck me in the back. But I learned a lot about the restaurant industry and the bar industry, and I kind of stayed with that industry all the way through college, even when I was back here over the summer. So it was somewhat second nature to me. Through college, I had some really fun worldly friends who opened my eyes up to not only the Vegases and the Miamis, but internationally some of what was going on in the nightlife world back in the late 90s and early 2000s. And we just felt like there was an absence of a real true kind of New York style lounge in San Diego. And nobody was doing bottle service at the time. So we were the first ones to introduce bottle service to San Diego. We opened Sidebar in January of 2003. And it was a 2,800 square foot lounge that we were doing about $4.5 million in sales out of in the first few years. So off the charts, kind of New York City type revenue per square foot, and just struck a chord, which led to Stingery and kind of took my, I never really planned on being a nightclub guy or even a restaurant guy. But it certainly kind of took hold of me for about 10 years, and I stayed in that hospitality space for quite some time.
Yeah, and one thing that I'm interested to dive into is that, both those industries, I think, are ones that people get in and they get stuck in. And, mortgage specifically, these guys or gals will make so much money, and it's fairly, I mean, it's, I don't want to call it easy, but it's sales. And then it's hard for them to get out. And so it's impressive and interesting that you're able to, you know, get in, make the money, and then get out. I guess, how did you end up getting out of the mortgage industry, or what drove you from it, or how?
That's also a funny story. I remember that day as clear as day too. I was actually where I had opened up an office in San Diego where I had about 15 employees. And that was a period in my life where I learned that I really didn't like managing people. So that was a great kind of life lesson, because I think it really helped me figure out what I was good at and what I wasn't good at. And, you know, in 2000, after the dot-com bust and rates kind of ticked up, you know, I really started to look at what I wanted to do. And I kind of took a year or two to kind of shut down the office, and I was just working from home. I had a new puppy. I literally was standing there in like basketball shorts, no shirt on, you know, working on my processing board, dealing with my processor. And I remember getting on the phone with this escrow agent who, you know, was talking to me like I was some schlep off the street. And it was a really frustrating conversation. And I was clearly already having a lot of trouble with just kind of waking up in the morning and having purpose. I mean, it was like, you know, the same revolving door of the same clients that rates would drop a half a point, and I'd call them back 5 months after I just refinanced them and do it all again. And it was like this merry-go-round of nonsense. And it was on that call that day that I hung up with that woman. And I said to myself, I am done. This is not what I want to do. I picked up the phone and called a couple of my other, you know, coworkers and people that worked for the company that we were part of. I handed off my entire processing board. I probably walked away from $100,000 of commissions, and I just, that day was it. I was over and done with. I never looked back, and I got into some real estate development stuff. I did some condo conversions, you know, prior to launching Sidebar, and had some fun with that. You know, I did probably 5 or 6 projects between Arizona, Las Vegas, and San Diego, and then got into the restaurants. The restaurants, you know, Hakkasan came knocking on the door. I have to say, if that hadn't happened, I might still just be a restaurateur. You know, Suja had already presented itself and was on its way. While I was still running, you know, kind of that restaurant kind of empire with Malarkey. And, you know, but the writing was on the wall for me that this was going to be a much harder, you know, model to prove out, as I wanted to kind of grow a brand into, you know, 15, 20, 30 restaurants across the country. And, you know, we, again, we got our door knocked on by the Hakkasan group, and it was just the right time, right place, because I did have an idea that Suja was going to be something special, and that's where I wanted to shift my energy to.
Yeah, and that's awesome. And obviously Suja has been such a success story. But on the restaurant nightclub side, so, you know, on one side, it's probably, you know, I remember me as a 21-year-old, when I heard of you, I was like, man, this guy's a legend. He owns the nightclubs. He's hanging out with Sean Merriman. Like, you know, there's definitely the cool factor that I think pulls people in. But it's funny because my perspective always on restaurants, I've looked at, you know, or nightclubs or bars, I've looked at investment deals over the year. I know a bunch of guys that have invested in them. I don't think any of them have ever made money. I think the biggest benefit is that they can look cool to the girl that they're trying to date. But obviously you had success in the space. Is there money in this business? I guess I mean,
yeah, I mean, there's no question about it. I mean, there's 2 things in the business that I think are special when you're winning. Number one, you know, I still get goosebumps when I walk into Herringbone on a Saturday night and it's pumping and people laughing and smiling, and there's, you know, beautiful people all over the place, and the restaurant sold out. Like, I still kind of get excited about that. That is a high that's hard to describe. And, you know, I can't even tell you how many couples have come up to me and said, hey, I just had to tell you, you know, me and my now husband met at Sidebar, or met at Bar West, or met at Seersucker, and we're married now. We have 3 kids, and we just wanted to come introduce our, I mean, like, dozens of times. And so that's really cool. And that is the part that kind of gets you excited. The other part, which is the only way that you get excited about that first part, is with actual success. And look, restaurants are incredibly hard. I've had a handful of really good ones that people always remember. But I've had some shitty ones too that have just fallen on their face and, you know, are really painful to unwind and shut down. But, you know, I mean, a good example is Searsucker downtown. I mean, when we launched that kind of when chaos was everywhere back in 2008 and 2009. The opportunity to take that corner location from Z Gallery presented itself, and without even hesitation, like, you know, Joe Ziden, the Z and Z Gallery, called me and said, hey, you know, we're thinking of shutting this down. We know you have Sidebar around the corner. Do you have interest? I was like, are you at the store? I'll be there in 5 minutes. And I was like, where can I sign, right? And the reason why was because real estate is really important in that business. And I think it's the number one driver of success. And, you know, we were doing 10, 11, 12 million bucks a year out of that place, making, you know, 2-3 million bucks in profit. And that's really hard to do. And when you get one of those, they're special. And, you know, I had a couple of them. You know, I had Sidebar, I had Stingery, which was a behemoth. And, you know, and, you know, there's also a really dangerous part to that industry. One that I kind of fell victim to. And you know, I certainly did my fair share of drinking and partying through all that stuff. And, you know, when Stingery opened, I had already had, you know, a daughter and a little boy on the way. And, you know, through the first few years of that, certainly had a lot of fun with, you know, we had everybody there. We had Kanye play there, Beyonce play there, Lil Wayne, you name it. Every athlete that came through came in, you know, but it also can catch up with you. And, you know, we opened that restaurant we opened Stingery in December of 2005. And, you know, I was out in Betty Ford by May of 2008. So it took a toll. It was a great change in my life, and I think set me up for the rest of my career. And, you know, I haven't had a drink since, and really happy about that. But, you know, it comes with, you know, there's, you know, if you're a cop, you got risk of being, you know, shot at by a criminal. If you're a fireman, you might die in a burning building. If you want to own nightclubs, you might wind up in the gutter. So, you know, you got to kind of weigh your risk tolerance, I guess, when you're going into a business like that.
Yeah, for sure. I couldn't imagine, you know, that part of it, just how fatiguing, you know, that would be and the toll it would take. So then you said that there was overlap with Suja. How did that play out, I guess? And then how did you see the opportunity there? And did you ever think that it was, you know, the opportunity that it turned out to be, or did you see that early on? Or?
Yeah, so there were, you know, there's always signs, right? Like if you're paying attention, there's little things that you can kind of point to and say, either I should have known, or hopefully you did know, right? And, you know, when I first approached Eric about doing something real with the business that he was running, which was just basically like a home delivery, fresh juice with no shelf life, and you had to drink the juices in 3 to 5 days. You know, we launched, you know, I would say that was maybe like May, right? And, you know, I shifted them up to the rooftop kitchen at Stingery, which is where we first started making our first rounds of Sushi Juice, believe it or not. And by early July, we had a meeting with Whole Foods that my partner Jeff Church had gotten set up after we brought him in as a partner and the guy who was going to be the CEO of that company. And in that meeting, which was supposed to be 15 minutes, it lasted over an hour. And by the end of the meeting, they asked us like, hey, can you guys be on the shelves by September? And of course, you know, as any entrepreneur would say, of course we can. I don't even think we had an official name yet of the business. And we certainly didn't have a process where we were going to be ready to roll. So, You know, we definitely got some signs in that meeting. After that meeting, one of the women who was in charge of Southern California Whole Foods had called Jeff and kind of positioned her niece, who was already working at Whole Foods, to potentially come work for the company. So that was another layer of like, wow, you know, if she believes in that thing this quickly, that much, there's got to be something there. So, you know, and then obviously, you know, things start falling into place, and it was pretty clear to me, you know, that was 2012 going into 2013. And by the time that we launched in Whole Foods, you know, we were well on our way.
That's an awesome story, and obviously it's classic. The whole, can you have the order by this time? Of course. Did you hit the deadline, or how did that work?
We did. Yeah, we had no choice. If we didn't hit the deadline, that might have been the end of the story.
Do you think that the success that you had in kind of your profile and track record, you know, helped you with that? Or, you know, if you were starting fresh, would you have been able to pull that one off, or?
Well, we had a great team, and it was definitely everybody was doing their part. I mean, Eric made these incredible juices that, you know, coming from the restaurant industry, consistency in any type of food product is really hard to do. And he managed to do that batch in and batch out, which was pretty incredible to me. You know, so he pulled his part. Jeff, as you know, a seasoned, you know, entrepreneur himself, put a great team together, and really got us in a position to be able to execute and hit that September date. And, you know, for me, it was more a matter of like, you know, figuring out how to market this thing and build some cachet around the brand, and, you know, seeding it to all the celebrities and athletes that I knew through my nightclub days and everything else. So, you know, it's a culmination of all those things. It's always a team effort. There's never really any one person that I think enables something like that to happen, where you catch lightning in a bottle. It's usually a culmination of things.
Yeah, so I guess switching gears to that point, you know, as an observer, kind of watching your career, and, you know, I'm blown away by the fact that you've got whatever it is. It's gonna be the wrong number, but 4 or 5 active businesses, and I'm like, how does this guy keep his head on? But it seems like one of the superpowers that you've had in business is being able to spot, you know, great complementary talent and create those partnerships. Talk a little bit about that. I know that obviously, you know, on the restaurant side, Brian Malarkey is a really household name. So I guess maybe starting with him, how did that come about? What was it like? You know, what's it been like working with him? And then on a bigger level, you know, how have you been able to find these great partners that play, you know, complementary to your strengths and do the things that maybe aren't your strengths or passions?
Yeah, and, you know, going back to that, you know, experience when I was running my own office down in San Diego on the mortgages, you know, one thing that I realized was that I really did not enjoy managing people. And, you know, even in the restaurant days, you know, my COO, Stacia Stevens, who was originally groomed at PF Chang's and spent a lot of time there. I mean, she was really the one that was driving the day-to-day business. I was more kind of the face of the brand on the side of the nightclubs. And then obviously, you know, teaming up with Brian on the restaurants, he became the face of the restaurants themselves. And I think we complemented each other very well and made some magic there. Partnerships aren't easy. You know, when Hakkasan was entered into the mix, and, you know, we're still partners with them on the restaurants. You know, it was a bit more challenging to kind of keep that unique dynamic that Brian and I had when it was just us. You throw a corporate partner into the mix, and all of a sudden it just throws the chemistry off, which then can kind of throw, you know, personalities off and friendships off, and shit happens. So, you know, for me personally, you know, whether it's Eric or Spaten, his talents with the juices, and realizing that he needed some structure around him, and then bringing Jeff in. For me, it was really clear that Jeff had already had this sustainable charitable water that he was doing called Nika, and they were on the shelves at Whole Foods, which was the light bulb for me that said, hey, maybe Jeff would want to do this since he's already there, which is how we got that first meeting. And one thing led to another. So, for me, you mentioned it earlier, when you talk about business and multiple businesses and all these different industries, whether it be hospitality, mortgage, consumer products, beauty, beverage, supplements, like, to me, it's all business. And to me, business is kind of a sport that I play, right? And I play to win. And I really subscribe to the way to play that game is the way that you play chess. And you have to be thinking about, 3 and 4 moves. Or a better analogy for you, Grayson, is, when you're snowboarding through the trees, right? Like, you're not looking at that next turn. You already know what your third turn down the tree line is, because your head is up. And if you don't, you're going to run right into a tree going, 30 miles an hour, right? So that's kind of the way that I approach business, and really try to map out the moves down the board quickly. And they change, right? Like, that might not been the best turn, or that might have been the best chess move. And you try to recover and make another move quickly. But I think if that's the way you're thinking about it, you're able to kind of, just like in snowboarding, when you're skiing through the trees, you're able to see the openings easier, right? When your head's up and you're looking down. And I kind of look at it the same way with business.
Totally. And I think that then those pivots become super clear. And I feel like, that's not to get political, but when I look at the current situation that we're in with COVID, one of the things that's tough for me as an entrepreneur is it's like, well, what does success look like? Like, what is the goal that we're trying to get to? And so it's been tough to gauge. And I think it's hard to spot the right pivot or move if you don't have a plan, and path in the first place. So I think that's a great analogy. So I guess looking at your businesses that you're running right now, when you're acquiring a company or building a company, is it just depend on the venture? Whether you're like, I want to build a lifestyle business that, will operate and run for a long time and kick off, profits and cash to allow me to, do the things that I want to be able to do and make an impact? Or are you like, I'm building this to sell? Or are you looking that far down the field as you're, in the ideation stage? Or talk a little bit about that if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah. I definitely think about exits. As my kids start to get older and I see what they want to do for a living and whether they have an entrepreneurial spirit or not, maybe that changes, right? Like, I may start thinking about things a little bit differently and potentially, think about, building a business to hand off to one of them or all of them or whatever. But right now I really don't think about it like that, because who knows, they're young and I don't know what, their future holds for them and what's going to make them happy. But absolutely. I think all the way through, and what a potential exit could look like, who the buyer would be if we did, how do you start to lay those breadcrumbs down to get to that place down the line? When we were building Suja from day one, I always thought Coke was going to be the buyer of that business. I thought that was the case in 2012, and in 2015, that kind of manifestation came to fruition. And, I really never had a doubt that they weren't going to be the partner. Now, I will say I did think that they were going to buy the rest of the business in 2018, and that didn't happen. And I ultimately now recognize that they probably will not own Suja outright ever. But we've had a great partnership with them to a degree and in certain aspects. And, and Suja has gone through many iterations of highs and lows and turbulence, and just really proud of where that business is today. And like you said earlier, balance sheet is really kind of what's able to allow companies to kind of be in the catbird seat right now, which is somewhat where we are, knock on wood. But yeah, I mean, that I definitely kind of think those things through, and for me, look, people really underestimate how, you've just gone through it. I mean, there's plenty of people who have started businesses, right? Then that tails off a little on people who've actually built businesses, right? And then you get to the point where there's people who actually sold businesses, and that's a real small subset compared to the people who actually started them. And I don't think people give enough credit to what it takes to actually sell and exit a business. It is incredibly challenging. There are so many different variables and factors that go into getting just from a signed LOI or term sheet to money in the bank. And, it's a skill. And again, you're playing a lot of chess through those things, and, your legal and your accounting teams and all those other potential third-party vendors that you're using all play a role. And, it's not easy, and it really is rewarding when you get it across the finish line. I'm sure you felt that way, when kind of the eagle lands. And, to me, that's ultimately like the trophy that I play for when I say that I consider it a sport.
Yeah, and I think that's a great analogy. And, it's funny because before with Power Digital, we sold it to Periscope, the private equity partner. I actually tried to do a transaction on my own and go acquire. It was about a $4 million type of business, and it didn't happen. The timing wasn't right, but it was a blessing because I would have just gotten my ass kicked trying to navigate through the legal diligence, the technology diligence, the accounting diligence. I mean, doing that on your own without people that have been through it and done it a bunch of times, it's a tall task. And to your point, there's that saying, which I'm about to butcher, but it's something like, you don't have a deal until you think you've lost it 3 times. And,
Yeah.
I think that is, from my experience, which is nothing to the level of yours, it is such a roller coaster ride. I feel so badly for, entrepreneurs that were in a process earlier this year and approaching the goal line, and then, COVID hits. I think that's stressful enough for any entrepreneur, but then throw in that you're starting to get towards the close, and you're starting to think about what you're going to be able to do for your family with the money that you're going to make and what the future is going to look like. And you're kind of in that 1 foot in, 1 foot out scenario. And it is grueling and tough. But I think,
yeah, it's intoxicating. You get trapped into those thoughts, and, you start thinking about the ski house, or, vacations that you're going to take, and colleges your kids are going to go to. And trust me, I mean, we had a great outcome on that first step with Koch and Goldman, but I can tell you right now, I thought for sure Koch was buying the rest of this business in 2018. And, I certainly was looking a little forward to that, and kind of got caught with a dose of reality, and was kind of hammered with some life lessons through that I certainly won't forget. And, so I do feel for those, entrepreneurs. But look, if they had a good business and there was somebody willing to buy it, hopefully they took this opportunity to not cry in their soup, and really took the opportunity to really hone in and make their companies even stronger. I can tell you right now, every single one of the companies that I'm involved in is stronger now than it was February 28th. Without any, and I went to, my doomsday shop was on February 29th at Costco. So I started to really think about it on the 29th, and actually made my way to Costco and bought some toilet paper and some other things. But prior to that, everything was still clicking away and business as usual. And I can tell you right now, today on July 14th, compared to where those businesses were at on February 28th, they're all stronger right now and in a better position to make it through this. And now I'm not saying they're going to do the numbers that we thought we were going to do in 2020, but the organizations are stronger. You know, we you know, at every company there's some form of bloat if you're, you know, over 10 people or 15 people or whatever it is. So really, you know, as painful as layoffs are, and there's nothing that I really, people always ask me, like, as far as like what's the biggest, like, aside from the prize and the eagle landing and like getting that trophy at the end of the day when you sell something, like the one thing that I really have gotten off on throughout my career as an entrepreneur, and I tell my kids this all the time, is, you know, I have employed thousands of people and created careers and, you know, help families get kids through school and, you know, set people up for, you know, a life that hopefully maybe would have been better if they had never met James Brennan or any of the companies that I was part of building. And for me, that really is probably the highlight of what I think being an entrepreneur is all about. There's so much positive power in being somebody who can create a living for somebody else. And, you know, that's the thing that kind of pisses me off about this political climate that we live in, and like, you know, attacking people who are successful and quote unquote rich. I mean, like, the amount of risks that I've taken in my life and business to create jobs for people ultimately, and really care about those people that work at the companies that I've been part of building is real. And you know, for it to be lambasted and people, you know, attack me or my kids for being quote unquote rich, I mean, they have no idea what it takes. 90% of these politicians are unhireable in the workplace, like unhireable. They know nothing about what it takes to run a business. And that's why you have some of the leadership that's out there today who just doesn't really even grasp what it means to go back into lockdowns where you're basically guaranteeing the company that you've been building for the last 15, 20 years is now done. And that's the thing that hurts me the most through this whole thing. And I don't want to take a left turn on you. This is your show, not mine. But, you know, that's really the thing that pisses me off the most about the way these cavalier politicians talk about this stuff. You know, they're all in their own bubble. The majority of them are lifelong politicians. You know, if it was up to me, I'd start a movement, and that movement would be term limits on senators and Congress people way, way lower than what anybody would even think would be, you know, the ability to actually get jobs done. Because then I think you'd get some people like me or you or somebody who would actually do a public service, throw their hat in a ring and suck it up for, you know, 4 or 6 years and make some change and get out, right? We got some problems in this country when it comes to politics and the media and the university system. And, you know, those are the 3 biggest culprits that I see that are really holding the United States back from being who it can be.
No, and I agree. And I think it's great perspective. And I appreciate you going there on this because it's the reality. And, you know, I think that the challenge right now is that if you're a great leader and somebody that really cares and you're not in it, you know, I think that other than getting power, which is not the right reason to go into any type of role, why would you ever want to be a politician? It's not a good job. It's a miserable job. And, you know, we were talking about earlier, why don't they put goals out? Well, they can't, because if you don't hit them, it's the gotcha. And so it's just a losing proposition. And so it forces them to run that business. And I get that it's different, and I think it is in a ton of ways, but I think there's also a lot of similarities. It forces you to run it in a way that is not how you would ever operate a great company. And it's interesting because right now, the biggest challenge or thing that's kept me up at night through this whole pandemic and stuff, and it's always been this, but it's the people. That's what I care about more than anything is, you know, the people that I work with. I think within Power Digital, we've probably got 10 plus future CEOs. You know, the guys that I look up to in business and in life are, you know, you look in the NFL and you see all these Bill Belichick assistant coaches or the tree, and these guys are now head coaches and winning championships. Yeah. And that's where you get the multiplier effect. And I think that's what entrepreneurs are able to do. And and a lot of entrepreneurs suck at being mentors. But I think that the really good ones are great at it. And it's not just the jobs that you're creating, but it's the things that those people go on to do. And you hope that they're going to be far more successful than you.
Yep.
But right now it's like just the gotcha mentality is what I'm seeing, where it's, you get these questions or, it's like the media is preaching the gotcha or we caught you doing something wrong. And it takes some of the fun out of the game.
Yep.
And so my hope is that doesn't last, long, but it is what it is. And, obviously you get the big risk by the big reward. And part of that is dealing with situations that are tough. But it's interesting because I think for any business leader right now, it's the Super Bowl of leadership. And, these times are going to go down in the history books. And so, I don't have any kids yet, but I hope to soon. And, I think about this period of time and, I want to be able to tell my kids, I showed up in this way through this period of time and be proud about, how I showed up, whether you win or whether you lose, the way that you played the game. And so I try to keep that, front and center, but it's easy to get off track and get frustrated or annoyed and be like, why am I dealing with this or dealing with that? But that's all victim bullshit. And, I'm having to remind myself more than ever to not fall into that, mindset, just because that's what you're seeing everywhere that you go.
Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing that I've done through all this to try to limit my my anxieties and my frustrations and just overall anger sometimes is we're now in our 6th week of no news in the Brennan house. 0, not even CNBC, and it's been the biggest blessing. It's really changed my whole attitude and outlook in such. I mean, I cannot understate the difference that it's made in my ability to be a better dad or a better husband or a better friend or a better son, in so many different ways, because, our media system and whether you're right or left or whatever is just completely broken. And we live in a country that's just, you have to kind of, if you're going to absorb the news, you have to go into it with the attitude like, what are they trying to manipulate me into thinking? And that is a shitty place to be. I mean, our news should be truthful and we should be able to trust it. And it's anything but that on no matter which outlet you're talking about.
Yeah, and agreed. And part of the issue is, when you have to have a 24-hour news cycle, you're going to have to fill it with a bunch of opinions and BS, and it's just not the news. But I know that we're getting short on time. Last thing I wanted to just get your perspective on, selfishly for myself, but also I think a lot of people, you've been a real visionary across a bunch of different industries. If you're looking down the road and where the puck is going, what categories, I guess, or like what types of attributes are you looking for in a company that you would start or acquire? What are some of the things that are on your kind of checklist or criteria that you look for and those categories that you think have tailwind and are going to be winners in the next, 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, so I kind of look more at, I try to tend to look at things maybe a little bit differently than most do. So I'm not looking at like sectors and saying, like I'm going to pivot and go into fintech, right? Like I don't know. I don't look at things like that. I look at more so like opportunity and like you said, where's the puck going? And at the end of the day, I'm kind of a marketer, right? Like that's what I think makes me me. Like I like to figure out, I love brand and creating brand, which is a form of marketing, right? And then figuring out how to get, people to think your product is cool, want to try it, and then it better be, otherwise they're not going to buy it again, right? So, I kind of have in some form of fashion, since I've gotten into the hospitality industry, I've kind of built and started my career around celebrity DJ, celebrity singer, and I've always paid a lot of close attention to that. And I've had a lot of friendships that are in that upper echelon of athletes and Hollywood actors and actresses and people that are, and then you look at where things have gone with like this new age of influencer, which we all talk about, right? And like, what's an influencer? You know, what resonates? Who can sell? Who can actually, like, you know, really truly sell versus who's just posting something and doesn't drive any revenue. And, you know, one of the things that, you know, since COVID, a partner of mine, we started a new kind of umbrella company called Sway Brands. The thesis around that is going to be, you know, ultra, like, hyper focused authenticity around influencer slash celebrity, around products that we feel, you know, have the ability to kind of create a special, you know, company around that you can kind of start to play those chess moves and move them down the line. You know, we have one sun care line that we're getting ready to announce here shortly with a specific celebrity and influencer that I'll be able to name a little bit later, and same thing with a tea company around a very authentic husband wife who are from India with a rich history in drinking teas and their family, and some recipes that we've really worked together on and put forward. And we're looking at all sorts of different deals that fall into that category. And we're also looking at other deals, like you said, that may be out there on the chopping block or you know, being shopped, and you know, could potentially kind of mirror up with the right celebrity or influencer, because I do think celebrity and influencers specifically in general has been overplayed. I think the ROI has really fallen off, and frankly, I think in the day and age that we live in right now, I think people are kind of a little bit over Instagram and Facebook and, you know, what's gone on there since all this has gone down. But I do still think there is influencers out there who have a real true following, a loyal following, who, you know, really believe in and consider those influencers like friends or part of their life. And that's something that we look for. And then we also really pay attention to is, are those influencers themselves, are they influencing these other influencers and celebrities? Like, who's following them? Is, you know, the other people that we know as household names, are they following that person before they're like the big, huge mega stars? So we're still kind of working through, you know, our kind of algorithm as we speak, as who's going to work and who's not going to work. And I'm sure we'll make some mistakes, but, you know, we're looking to, over the next, you know, 3 to 5 years, have a dozen or so of these companies out there built up under one umbrella. And, you know, we've got 2 that we're already kind of well down the road on and getting ready to launch. One towards the end of the year, one at Q1 of next year. And we've got a couple other that we're exploring as well.
That's awesome. And I think did a great lesson, you know, and it's a good reminder for me, and I think for a lot of young entrepreneurs, is, you know, really the way your criteria is playing to your superpower and what you're great at, which is brand and marketing. And so it doesn't necessarily matter the exact category. And I'm sure there's things that you look for, like reoccurring revenue and, you know, things of that, margins that make, you know, things more viable or not, and, you know, where you think the puck's going. But obviously what you're great at is, you know, spotting that thing that's going to be cool, making it cool, and then marketing it. And so as long as you're playing to those, you're going to have a very high likelihood of winning, and you're probably going to have a lot of fun too, because you're doing what you're passionate about and what you love to do. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's a great reminder. But James, thanks so much, man, for the time. It was awesome talking to you. I could sit here and listen to you all day long, and, you know, just learn a ton, and you're the man. So thanks for taking the time to join me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, definitely. I appreciate it too. It was definitely a great chat. And I look forward to getting back to San Diego and meeting up with you for dinner at Herringbone. We're allowed to go back indoors and dine.
Sounds good. I look forward to that too.
All right, buddy.
Well, thanks, man.
See you, Grace.